Okay, here it's 11:15 p.m. where I am. I'm recording my second video about the importance of the categories. I will not make the same detailed intro each time, but basically I know myself to be the whole of reality. It's very strange. The only way that I have, I think, to prove that I am the whole of reality is to produce a universal speech that you will find in links in the description below. And therefore, because I'm the whole of reality, I know myself to be the root of all evil, which is kind of problematic for others and for me. But I'm not just negative, thank God. I have also positive. I will try to limit the negativity. I accept that I have to take the blame for everything which goes wrong, and I'm partly negative, partly positive, and my way of balancing the negativity is to teach the importance of the categories and logic. Yeah. So, my piece of advice, if you stumble upon this video, keep calm, listen to this song, watch my videos, work hard. I recommend that you should quit your school, whoever you are. Probably you are, at first you probably are a person living in an Anglo-Saxon country. So the educational system. Let's talk about the educational system. I think that eventually some of my videos, or many other videos available on the internet, are much more interesting than the kind of nonsense that is being taught in most schools. But the reason why people have to be dumbed down, it's actually very complex, because as Nietzsche would say, the advantage of having a bad memory is that one forgets difficult moments, and one is always surprised in a good sense when one rediscovers the positive aspects of life. So sometimes being dumbed down and being made stupid can have its good aspects. So eventually it's not that bad if you... I mean, the educational system is really terrible, but maybe there's a reason why. We will see that later. But yeah, so remove your kids out of school, because they don't teach much these days in school. But precisely revolting against the inefficiency and the platitude and the problems of the educational system is a way of asserting one's own identity. I have to be a little bit negative, to be a little bit rebellious, and then to gain knowledge on one's own account. And it's only by gaining knowledge for oneself that one can compare the standards of what is done in the system. Watch my videos about the Central Intelligence Agency. Yeah, and here's a song by D12. I don't want to go to school, I don't need no education, etc., etc. I'm trying to save the nation, but at least the best aspects. Yeah, and work harder, better, faster, stronger. And you can watch this video. Yeah, so now I will produce videos for the many hours to come. I will take short breaks, but yeah, in a productive phase, let us say. So, let us talk about logic. I have reshaped slightly the system. Logic is the mind of God, simplified to the utmost. There is being, essence, concept. I will not go into many complexities. You can find more complex aspects on this channel or somewhere else on the internet, probably, if you look well. And then nature is the realm of time, space, matter, energy, movement, which is usually divided in physics, chemistry, biology, and the earth sciences, which are included within physics and biology, and Geist, which means spirit, divided in subjective, objective, and absolute. And the subdivision, simplified, would be anthropology, the study of the determinations of man as a socio-biological creature, psychology, the mind of man and the psyche of man. So this is the soul, the study of the soul. Objektiver Geist is how the soul exteriorizes itself in institutions, so that the collective life of a people, which is influenced by the anthropological determinations. Morality is how to behave individually, the notion of right and wrong, good and evil, etc., etc. Sittlichkeit includes what would be called today's economics, sociology, politics, and eventually all the sub-branches. It's really simplified to the utmost. And Absoluter Geist is the expression of the soul and the spirit, in the sense of Geist, of a people through art, religion, and philosophy, and all the aspects. Logic is the unity of being, essence, concept. Logic, nature, and Geist are interconnected, and they reciprocally determine one another. And in order to understand a country, or any country, one has to understand all the aspects in a way. And here I simplify, I will introduce this because it's really important. UPS, universal, is a category which applies to all the members of a class, namely all the particularization. The example, I will set up the whatever, the table board, and I talk during this. The universal is that which applies to many classes, which we call particularization, and it remains what it is through each particularization. Namely, here I will begin by talking about alcohol. Alcohol would be the universal, and alcohol is alcohol, whether it's beer, wine, champagne, vodka, or whatever. These are particular types of alcohol that are sold in liquor stores, usually. The singular is to the particular what the particular is to the universal, and we call this a singularization. Namely, this is a singular bottle of Jack, and here I can introduce Kesha, and also a little bit of mythology. Like a bottle of Jack, we're gonna fight till we see the sun. The sun is the same for all, but there are people who are more spontaneously attracted towards the sun. So, yeah. So, let us have a bottle of Jack, the Kesha, TikTok, yeah. That's in the realm of art to express, yeah. I'm gonna fight till we see the sunlight. It may not be tomorrow morning, but eventually I'm gonna fight until with my weapons, which are kind of intellectual, and yeah, until the light of the sun shines upon all, but hopefully a European sun. Yeah, so let us talk about alcohol. So here would be alcohol, the various particularization would be beer, champagne, wine, vodka, whiskey, etc. And this bottle of whiskey is a singular. There are other examples. This can of beer is a singular of a particular brand, of a particular type of alcohol, etc. etc. But the universal, namely the alcohol, is not modified. I mean, it is modified, but it remains what it is. Whatever the particularization, namely alcohol is alcohol, whether it's made for drinking or not, it's still alcohol. And the distinctions between the various particularization are determined qualitatively, quantitatively. They can be difference of essence. For instance, positive and negative. Drinking panache, which is a mixture of lemonade and beer, it's considered quite positive. Drinking medical alcohol would be kind of negative. So that would be, in terms here of health for the organism, you shouldn't drink this. Actually, ideally, you shouldn't drink alcohol at all, but if you have to choose, it's better to drink this. but no alcohol. That would be true to the puritanical spirit of America and most virtuous countries. But we'll talk about morality later. Let us first talk about the categories. So it's classified in a specific order. Not exactly, because not exactly yet. Now it's in proper order. There is a logic to this order. Restoring order begins by restoring logic. That's the importance of logic. So here I will illustrate with the category of continuity these various bottles or cans of alcohol. Hopefully we see them. Do we see clearly? They are ordered in a logical fashion, in a continuity. This is a category of quantity. Namely, there's a continuity of degree in alcohol from the lowest, I will show it's 0 degree of alcohol, to the highest, 90 degree. And the moment of quantity, put it very simply, it's a determination of being. Namely, it is within the mind of God. Quantity is, simplified, the being of a thing which can be indifferently modified, increased or decreased, without changing the being of whatever quantity changes. So there are two moments, continuity and discretion, and here to illustrate very simply, it goes, this series of bottles of alcohol, it goes from 0 degree of alcohol, so it's a beer without alcohol, and to 90 degrees. So there's a continuum, and here I will illustrate. So here we have, hopefully we see, 0 degree beer, so a beer without alcohol, but it's a blonde beer, so it's good nonetheless. Panache, it's 0.35, we do not see very well, but it's 0.35, so it's lemonade and alcohol. Here we have a specialty from Normandy, which is a region of France. It's sweet, 2.5, so it's kind of made up of alcohol, made up of apple, I think. Yeah, so it's qualitatively different. Here it's it's qualitatively different. It's lemonade and beer. Here it's made of apple. Here is a Chinese beer, 4.7%. They are becoming as decadent as the Westerners. These Chinese, they too drink alcohol. Maybe decadence is a universal. You can put the blame on God, which is But we'll talk about the need to find a redemption when there is too much decadence. So here it's 4.2 beer. It's from the region where I live in. Here it's Italian wine, Lambrusco. It's 8% alcohol, so it's qualitatively different. You have beer. They are qualitatively different in the sense of the origin, but actually they are the same qualitatively. They are the same particularization, if you will. Both are beer, but the quantity here changes. Here it's 4.7 and 4.2. Actually, the Chinese beer is stronger than the German beer for now, but we'll try to restore the balance. The Germans, they can produce a strong beer. Like here it's Dutch beer, 11.6%. Very intense. Very strong. Here it's wine from my region, 12%. So here we have the same quality, not in a sense of good versus bad, but if we had to qualify, we would say this is beer, this is beer, this is beer. This is Panache, it's partly beer, and this is also beer, but without alcohol. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They could be qualified, particularized in the same basket, but they are quantitatively different from the softest to the strongest. Yeah, and here we have wine. Here it's champagne, which is another qualitatively different type of wine. It's 12%. And here we have the stronger alcohol, that which we call liquor. I think here it's lychee alcohol, 15%. Italian alcohol, amaretto, it's 24% of alcohol, so it's more intense in terms of quantity. Here it's Scott, I think, no, Tennessee, from Tennessee, but actually it's from Scotland. That's American alcohol, 40%. And here it's really for the strong-willed, or those in need. Maybe those who have a strong will find themselves in a situation of need at some moments. 70% alcohol and 90%. I recommend that you shouldn't drink this, but ideally the purpose is not to drink any kind of alcohol, but it's not that bad if you drink alcohol. So let us talk about the logic of quantity. So here it's the first moment of the concept of quantity, namely continuity and discretion. We'll talk about this later with a different example. Whatever is continuously determined can be discretely separated. Namely, there's a continuum from 0 to 90, and the discrete moments are below 5, between 8 and 12, between 15 and 40, and above 40. These are arbitrary, discrete separation of the same continuum, but it can be infinitely separated. That's die schlechte Unendlichkeit, the bad infinite of the mathematician. Then it could be 1%, 2%, 3%, or 1.2, 1.3. It can be infinitely, discretely separated, but it is one continuum. So that's the concept of quantity in logic. And there's another concept, quantum, that which we call in ordinary language number. I will not make a full detailed lecture on the logic of quantity, but basically the concept of number emerges in the mind of God in the moment of quantity. There's the unity and Anzahl. It's a complex German speculation. We will skip that part for now. But another concept, another category of quantity is quantum, which is another word from number, in terms of intensity and extension. And the two can be thought of indifferently and independently from one another, but actually they are logically united. Namely, what is intense is extended, and what is extended, there is a reason for the extension, namely it is intense. And I can make illustrations. Here, let us illustrate with alcohol. A very strong alcohol, a very strong Dutch beer, will have extended effects in terms of feeling dizzy and eventually, a very, let us imagine a very prestigious brands of whiskey, really the expensive one, the Scotch, which is really expensive. It's intense in terms of craftsmanship, requirements, the know-how to produce the alcohol. It will be extended in popularity or in price. So a very intense, not in terms of degree of alcohol, but in terms of quality, in a sense of a good, really a great Scotch or a great whiskey produced by talented craftsmen. It's intense in terms of requirements for production, and it will be extended either in the reputation of the brand, or the price, or the number of customers, or an ordinary beer. We could take an American example. It's very extended because it satisfies an intense striving for feeling better while, I don't know what is the psychological reason to feel better while drinking alcohol, but basically it is just an illustration of the unity of the concept of intensity and extension, and what the Americans call a hangover, really an excess of alcohol. If one drinks too much, it will be extended longer. That will have a headache for a longer time. We will maybe throw up more often. It's not but the two are connected, and the concept of quantity determines itself, and the unity of quality and quantity. So quantity can be indifferently changed without modifying the being of whatever quantity changes, namely a beer at 4.2% or a beer at 11.6. The quantity here, the degree of alcohol, which is a determination of chemistry. Chemistry would be here, and selling alcohol would be in Sittlichkeit to satisfy anthropological needs. The quantity can change. The quality, here I'm not saying that this one is better than the other, although it probably is, but I mean for those who, the quality in terms of what is it? It's a beer. The quality is a beer. A different quality would be Italian wine or champagne or liquor. That would be a qualitative change. A quantitative change is these beer, and they are indifferent in the sense that it doesn't modify the being of whatever is qualified, namely beer. But there comes a moment when an indifferent quantitative change turns into a qualitative change, and here I will not illustrate with beer but with alcohol in general, namely when we go from 2 to 4% degree of alcohol until 15, 25, 40 degrees, it's a quantitative change, but it's also qualitative in a sense that, for instance, there are certain people who are not allowed to drink strong alcohol, or the sales of certain types of alcohol requires a license. That's a determinacy of Sittlichkeit. Maybe in some countries they are allowed to sell beer to a relative limited extent, like it's not allowed to serve beer in pubs to people who are already drunk, or sometimes it's not allowed to drink on the public place, etc. But strong alcohol, they may be restricted, or the quantity, when one drinks one beer, usually it's 33 centiliters or 50, and for the strong alcohol it's 4 centiliters. I don't know what the measures are, the measures in the sense of the determinacy of quantification are in different countries, but basically when the quantity, the degree of alcohol changes in one way, it changes in another way, namely the quantity that is tolerable to be drunk without becoming drunk. And the quantitative, so here I'm talking about measure, the quantitative change makes it so that when a certain quantitative limit is transcended, the quality change, namely drinking whiskey or vodka or whatever, it can be more or less appreciated. But there comes a moment when alcohol at 40%, it's strong, and it requires not all people appreciate this, but they can. But when alcohol is concentrated in terms of degree of alcohol to 70%, it's no longer alcohol to be drunk. It's poison if it's drunk. At 90%, it's even worse. And one cannot clean a wound with a 4% alcohol beer, and one cannot drink a 70 or a 90% alcohol, medical alcohol, that would be poisonous. So when the quantity seems indifferent at first, but when it goes beyond a certain limit, the quality changes. That's a change of measure, the unity of both. I don't need to illustrate, it's just, precisely I need to illustrate, but I don't need, I think, more examples. So and and here, to introduce a little bit of speculation, a beer with 0% is an attempt to have beer without beer. Namely, it would be, here I will introduce the category of quality that I've already made this in another video, but basically that's the appearance of a beer, but it's not really a beer because an ingredient essential to beers, namely alcohol, is made absent. So it's some sort of a Hegelian beer because it's a unity of opposed determination, but it's not really a beer. So it's not really a beer, but also it's maybe a speculative beer, namely it's a unity of opposed determination. Yeah, I try to illustrate. So yeah, and now let us talk. We talked about the logic of quantity, etc., and quality and measure. Now let us talk about the realm of Geist. So of course the degree of alcohol which are being consumed by the people have an impact upon their health. They can suffer from addictions, and medicine would be the transition between biology and anthropology. An excess of alcohol consumption can bring about problems with the health of the liver, of the heart, the blood pressure. It can create antisocial behavior in the realm of morality. Alcoholics, they can be dangerous for their relatives. They can beat up their wife, their children. They can become they could create car accidents. So this become a public problem. So alcohol, which is at first chemically determined, which is used by humans for anthropological reasons, to have fun, to let go a little bit, to become more confident, etc., etc. It can create psychological problems and eventually psychiatric problems, and also problems of morality in the realm of legislation. It has to be socially regulated, but it brings economic profit. It is sociologically determined, and usually people in the lower strata of society, the less intellectually endowed or less intellectually gifted, they tend to suffer more from problems of alcoholism, etc., etc. So there is a sociological determination, but it brings about economic prosperity. And then there is the religious aspect, namely the reason why alcohol is being prohibited by many religions, or promoted depending on the religion, is because of the negative consequences it has upon the social life. That's why the Muslims forbid the drinking of alcohol, because then there are various anthropological determinations. Some people, we'll talk about the question of anthropology a little later, some people are more prone to suffering from diseases, and in the case of America, in the official narrative, giving alcohol to the native Indians has been some sort of a way of poisoning them in a way. That's kind of the truth, because they were less well endowed to resist the negative effects of alcohol, which only someone who has studied race realism can know this, because in order to understand why the native Indians are biologically different from the white settlers in their relationship to alcohol, one has to have a knowledge of race realism. So yeah, in order to denounce the crime of these evil white people, one has to study the science of the evil white people. The leftists, they should understand that, because there are reasons why some group of people are more vulnerable to drinking alcohol, because of the historical, in the official narrative, the historical process of evolution, etc., etc. Yeah, and another example, let us talk about the example of America. An attempt to suppress the sales and the consumption of alcohol brings about Al Capone, namely, it's a contradiction which hasn't been solved, namely if it's the public authority, the government, which wants to suppress a tendency of the people, namely the need to drink alcohol, it re-emerges on the black market, like free speech on the internet, censorship and free speech, etc. It's in a dialectical reciprocal interaction. So the way to solving the problem is not, I mean, it can be temporarily religious puritanism, like to forbid, and that would be the theocratic version we find in some Muslim country, the hard version, like it's forbidden to drink alcohol, and if you do, I come back. If you do drink alcohol or too much alcohol, there will be consequences. It exists. But ideally, I mean, sometimes there's a need to inflict a little bit of yeah, but ideally a virtuous people would give up on alcohol spontaneously because they would find another way to have entertaining relationship, and there can be a connection between a bad economic situation which gives an incentive for people, a psychological incentive to drink alcohol because they are afraid of losing their job, but or they are dependent on the welfare state, so they become addicts, etc., etc. This is what Murray and Ernstein talk in the bell curve. I have the book, but I don't need to show the book. So basically, the right way here, the Aufhebung would be a country which does not drink alcohol, not because they are living in the fear and terror of being whipped or being suppressed or being taxed or being rejected, but because they say, okay, we don't need alcohol, and if we do, it will be really in a proper measure, a little bit of wine, because it stimulates. If you have watched my video on food, it stimulates human creativity. For instance, champagne, it's an achievement of European creativity, like most forms of alcohol. But giving up on drinking alcohol is the kind of that's the logic of Christianity. No alcohol, then there is sin. What kind of alcohol? Beer. There is fall into sin by drinking beer, but then the way out of sin, the redemption, is to say, I don't need to drink beer. I have to carry the burden of maybe having a hangover or having suffered from liver problems, etc. There are the negative which come with the positive. In the sense, the positive would be the will to experiment beer. The negative would be the side effects, and the way out of the problem would be to say, okay, even if I'm offered beer or alcohol or whatever, I will say no, thank you. I don't need to. That's a way of overcoming a problem. Yeah, that's Aufhebung. Yeah. There's also the more radical version, but eventually a healthy society should be able to have a healthy relationship with alcohol, which means really being limited or not being present at all, but then it would imply a very complex, that's the ambiguity. The positive, that it stimulates human creativity, beer, champagne, great whiskey or vodka, etc., etc. And the negative, with the positive come the negative, and here are the problems of morality tied with economics. Namely, if everyone was virtuous, that's the fable of the bees, Mondeville. If everyone is virtuous, the society would be poor, because there would be no sins. In the Middle Ages, people were virtuous. I mean, that's the image that we have, but the economy was kind of poor. In modernity, with the development in developed countries, societies are prosperous, but the people is kind of decadent and morally a little bit degenerate. The idea is to find a proper balance, namely to have self-limitation, that would be a determination of measure, and while being remaining economically productive. Yeah. Keep working if you have a useful job. I'm not sure that what I'm doing is useful. Actually, I'm sure it is. So now let us introduce a little bit of controversy, because in modern day Western countries, drinking alcohol, that's not a problem. But talking about scientific topics, it has become a problem. But let us use the categories of quantity that I have introduced. And here the smart people, they might understand what I'm trying to do, and they might say, you are scheming, I know what you are doing, but really here it's really the high level of really the smart people. Or when they rewatch eventually the video, they say, we understood what he was trying to do. I don't know if I will succeed, but basically, I have introduced the categories of quantity for the average idiot. Now, a little bit more complex, we will use the same category for a different topic, which is more important, in a way, the question of anthropology. These are very politically correct books, Populism, Immigration, and the Future of White Majorities, a book by Ann Coulter about the left's plan to turn our country into a third world hellhole, and a book by a very respectable American who defends a kind of controversial ideas, but I will explain why they are controversial, and I will explain the development of the intellectual life of the US eventually. So, white identity. So now let us talk about America, but actually about the Western world with the categories of quality, quantity, measure. Make America great again in the mind of most people. Most is quantitative Verhältnis, a quantitative relationship. In the mind of a lot of people who believe in this slogan, what they unconsciously think, and here it can be used to blame white people, but also to speak the truth, but I will say what this means. It means, in their mind, let us make America like it was in the 1950s, when it was the dominant economic, moral, military superpower. They had the prestige, technological dominance, soft power, hard power. They were the best. Yeah. And what they mean unconsciously is that the population has changed over the course of the past 70 years, and to make America great again, for a significant proportion of the people who agree with this slogan, is restore the proper measure, namely America was great, that's what they think, when it was 85 or 90% white. And going from 90 to 60, for instance, is a quantitative change. I explain what happens, namely when 90% of a population is of a given ethnicity, that's a quantitative determination, namely it's a percentage, it's a proportion, that's in the logic of quantity. And when it goes from, for instance, 90% to 60%, it's a quantitative change, so apparently it's indifferent, and that's what the leftists think, that whether America is 90% white or 60% white or 50 or lower, it's kind of indifferent to them, but actually a change of quantity brings about a change of measure, which means there comes a moment when an indifferent change, welcoming more immigrants or a change of birth rate, etc., brings about a change in the composition of the country in terms of anthropology, psychology, law, morality, Sittlichkeit, in terms of culture, eventually. And this is what the people in America and in the West, what they unconsciously revolt against. They revolt against the change of measure. They think that their country was great when it had, unconsciously for them, the proper measure, and this is what the left accused them of thinking. I know how the left and the right think. Yeah. And when Donald Trump says France is no longer France, what he means is that France, a few decades ago, in the official narrative was 95 or 96% white Christian of Greco-Roman culture, and now it's lower in terms of quantity, so the measure has changed, and therefore France has lost its identity from the perspective of Donald Trump, who says this, and this is what the MAGA people, they think. That it's a way of illustrating the quantitative change, which brings about a change of measure, which is a change of the quality, not in a sense of good or bad, but the change of what is it. It changes when the quantity changes up to a certain extent, but what the MAGA people what they think is that America lost its quality in both sense. That it was better 60 years ago. That's what they think. Not because it was different in terms of identity, but also because it was more religious, there was more morality, people were more sane psychologically, the economy was better, etc. That's what they think. I translate in logical language what people think. And the leftists, they have to agree. The white leftists. And the anti-racist of all sorts, they have to agree as well, because this is kind of the truth. Yeah. And let us talk now about precisely the question of race. Is that continuity and discretion? It applies to the determination of race. And here I will criticize. I have to criticize everyone eventually, and then everyone will criticize me. I can anticipate, but basically, in the right-wing spheres, in the white nationalist spheres, but actually all the people who talk about race, their debates, they are around the question of who is black or white or Hispanic, what is the qualification, how do we qualify, how do we identify is the determination of essence. How do we differentiate a white person from a non-white? Namely, what is white identity in terms of anthropological determination? And the answer is logical. And I'm just explaining here what happens in the mind of the people who think about this. Namely, they say that someone who is just, let us say, 93% white in terms of determination of anthropology, it can be translated into genetic language. They say someone who is just 93% white, he's not really white in the sense that for them, real white would be 100%. But here's the trick with the alcohol. If the same logic is applied, one would say that this is not really alcohol because it's just 40%, that real alcohol would be only 90%, but if only the extremes of the continuum are the proper standards for what qualifies, here in this case as white, non-white, or alcohol, good alcohol or not, it would mean that everything in between would be quantitatively indifferent. Namely, the people who say if you are not 100% white, you are not white, for them they think that whether you are 15% white because in the long run you have a great-grandfather or something who was white, for them they say if you are not purely white, you are not white at all. So for them there is no difference in the continuity, so they are indifferent to the quantitative change. And for them, someone who is 65% white or 93% that would be indifferent. But if we follow this logic, it means that there is no difference between drinking 0.35% alcohol, 40% alcohol, and 90% alcohol. And I'm sure that the people who think like this, whether they are right-wingers or left-wingers, they would not enjoy drinking this kind of alcohol. That would be a little bit, they would notice probably that a quantitative change brings about also a qualitative change, a change of measure. The kind of debates that, here it's not really a praise, because it's not really smart, but the kind of debates that people have in the right-wing white nationalist circle, and probably also in the leftist circle, on the question of who is white, black, Hispanic, Asian, etc., etc. It's a debate around logical categories, and of course, that the distinction, and here it's a problem for the Census Bureau in the US. How do you qualify a white person, a Hispanic, etc.? It's simply that continuity and discretion are united, like the US are supposed to be. But there are inner conflict, inner division for logical attempts to solve the contradiction, whatever. So, because continuity can be discretely divided, one can arbitrarily set a limit to say, for instance, that 80% is the distinction between who is white or Hispanic. If you have less than 80%, or let's say 75, less than 75%, which means 3 out of 4 grandparents who are white, you are Hispanic. If it's more, you are white. That could be an arbitrary distinction, but of course the limit of the measure is arbitrary, but it doesn't mean that there is no distinction. The same goes in physics with the changes of the wavelength of rays of light. So that's just to illustrate with alcohol and questions of race and on an individual level, who is white, non-white, etc., and on a collective level, what does it mean to make a country great again, the relationship between the anthropological foundation of a people, its psychology, its law, morality, Sittlichkeit, and eventually its forms of artistic expression. Everything is interconnected and can be understood through the use of the proper categories. And now I will explain to the American audience and to the Western audience why certain books appear. I explain very simply, and here also in the realm of economics, a quantitative change in the realm of IQ. Here, okay, the video will be a little bit long, but I just illustrate with the categories of quantum intensity extension. Here it's very simple, but here we could have a scale for IQ and more or less intense IQ. High IQ, the higher they are, the more extended are their faculties. Namely, someone with an IQ of 110, he can perform, if he's healthy, he can perform more tasks in a more productive way, in a more efficient way. He can work faster, etc., than someone with an IQ of 80%. That's one of the reasons why people complain about certain forms of anthropological changes, because they understand the relationship between intelligence, etc., and they think that it's best to have a country with a high IQ because I know what you're trying to do. Yeah. Eventually, I will say what I think, but yeah, I'm trying to scheme a little bit. Yeah, but at least I'm honest in saying that I am scheming. At least he's honest. Yeah. So yeah, a change of the intensity of the IQ has a change, produces a change in the extension on an individual level, the number of tasks that an individual can perform, the variety, the complexity, etc. A higher IQ can perform more tasks, and on a collective level, the higher the collective IQ of a society, the more prosperous will be the economy, the better health system, etc., etc. I made videos where I detail these books, but basically this is the connection. And that's why eugenicists want to improve the IQ to make the society better in terms of economics, health issues, morality, etc., etc. Yeah. And yeah, so now I will explain from a logical standpoint, from the development of the consciousness that people have, why these kind of books appear in the collective psyche of Americans, but throughout the Western world. It's because wide shift. There is a demographic change in the ethnic composition of most Western countries, namely quantitative changes, which eventually at some point becomes changes of measure, which brings about changes in psychology, law, morality, Sittlichkeit, economics, sociology, politics, etc., etc., and religion eventually. And this brings about fears and doubts in the native population, the historical native population, which forces them to turn toward populism and right-wing political parties. This is the political shifts in the life of the West over the past 10 or 15 years, one can say. And this process is the phenomenology of spirit, which is actually my spirit, that I understand. A book like this, I will explain what this means. It's an attempt to unite Americans against what is considered a threat from Hispanic immigrants, And I have read the book My Mrs. Coulter a long time ago, but I now understand the idea, the attempt that this book, the contradiction that this book is attempting to solve is to unite historical Americans, namely blacks and whites, against what is considered to be a threat to American value and American society. And it's an attempt to unite what has never really been united in the history of the US, or on a very rare cases, by saying, basically, the real Americans are whites and blacks, and the Hispanics, they are invaders. The natives, let's pretend that they do not exist. Which quantitatively is kind of the case, but for historical reasons, but whatever. So that's an attempt to solve the contradiction. But the blacks, there are some who are kind of, I understand how they think. They say, that's kind of bullshit. We were never united. When America was majority white, either we were discriminated against, or we had lower standards of living. So we are not buying into your attempt to unite us. So that's why it's contradictory. But because there are, of course, there are blacks who agree with this kind of hard Republican stance, namely, let us unite Americans on traditional American values like Puritanism. I mean, not completely, but Protestant values, hard work, rule of law, the Constitution, freedom of speech, freedom of association, gun ownership, etc. And we will unite people of goodwill, independently of color, which is the idea of the Constitution. But basically, those who say this, they are mostly white, and they think that, okay, if we advocate these kind of ideas, basically our secret purpose is to preserve the white majority, and we will scheme to please the left, who wants to bring in Hispanics, etc. Yeah, I understand how they think, but I just explained the appearance of such a book in the collective psyche, and we find the same types of books in most Western countries. I made a list that we put the link. This explains the process of consciousness. And now, because I understand American life very well, a book like this one, it's on a different level in terms of stages of consciousness. Namely, here it's the Ann Coulter Republican level, and the next level is the Jared Taylor type of stage of consciousness, namely an attempt to solve the contradiction, namely the threat of erasure of white people. It's to say, basically, at least here, whatever one thinks about Jared Taylor, he's being maybe more honest than Ann Coulter. I don't blame them, but I explain. He said, okay, white and black, it has never really functioned, so let us separate ourselves. That's a negative relationship, but he wants to unite all whites, namely the historical whites of America, those who have founded this country and developed its institution, namely the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, plus Italian whites, Irish, Eastern, namely any American who is white, but eventually any white person in the world. That's why it's Jared Taylor, is a singular man, advocated a particular cause, namely that of white people. But for white people of America, that's why it's called American Renaissance, but it's universal in the sense that he defends the interest of white people of all countries, the interest of their preservation and the right to have, the right to live collectively without facing the threat of being replaced. But what Jared Taylor, Mr. Taylor, what you don't understand is that it's a moment in the process of consciousness, and that white identitarian policies are becoming made conscious through the use of the internet, which is an American invention. And there's a change in the process of the consciousness of spirit worldwide, namely whites who have access to the internet, they can become aware of the threat of demographic replacement which threatens them, and grow as a collective consciousness and learn about their identity their determinations, etc. And this is what happens in the realm of spirit. And here, in a way, the attempt to solve the contradiction is more honest, because there's to acknowledge that, okay, black and white, it hasn't worked always. I mean, it has partly worked, but it hasn't worked for everyone. So it's kind of negative but honest. But also, there's another form of dishonesty, namely the will to unite all whites, which have been more united because of anthropological reason than whites and blacks on a quantitative scale. But what the left understands, because I understand the manipulations of the left, probably in American advertisement, the Americans are often reminded that white Italians, the Irish, and the Eastern European, but mostly the Italians and the Irish, they haven't been welcomed always by the WASP evil majority. Remember, dear white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, how you treated the Italians and the Irish in the 19th century? Do you remember the discrimination? That's a manipulative trick used by the left to try to prevent the unification of whites by trying to spread division within white people. That's very smart. That's very smart. It cannot be denied that those who are scheming at this level of consciousness, they are pretty smart, they are pretty good. I know, because I've seen the advertisement when Americans are reminded the Irish, they faced discrimination, so join the side of diversity, not those who wants to, yeah, I understand. But what people do not understand is that these stages are different levels of the rise of collective consciousness. Namely, people are identifying with various groups who claim to defend their interests, which in a way they do. This is a rise of identity politics and identity consciousness, and here I will just briefly talk, because the video is already very long, about the categories of identity and difference in the realm of anthropology. These are categories of essence, namely identity politics is a tool used by the left, and ethno-differentialism, namely the will to differentiate one's own ethnic group, is also identity politics. So what happens in the collective process of spirit, that I understand and I try to share the intelligibility, is that in order to defend white identity, one has to differentiate oneself from others. And the difference here is in the realm of anthropology, which, as I've showed, is quantitatively measure quantity, quality, etc., etc. And identity and difference, eventually it turns in difficult situation into opposition, namely, here positive and negative doesn't mean good and bad, it simply means opposition, because positive would be diversity and negative would be white identity. And here is all the conflicts of America, but also the conflicts of the Western world and the conflicts of spirit, namely the ideal of America is supposed to be neutrality in terms of race, but there is a contradiction because people are spontaneously determined to favor their own ethnic group. So diversity, namely the idea that America is a country for everyone who adopts the American standards in terms of work ethic, respect of the rule of law, respect of the constitution, property rights, freedom of speech, freedom of association, etc. These are the positive here in the good sense, in the sense of judgment, the positive aspects of America, and the negative in terms of morality would be the racism. And here all the problems of the contradictions of American life is that the diversity people are on the side of American values, but they are kind of hypocritical because they use American values to try to subvert the historical white population, who are the historical proponents of the ideals of America, namely race neutrality, and that's why there are conflicts and contradictions. And yeah, for now I will just show the process. And yeah, what people do not understand is that this is how spirit evolves in America and in the entire Western world to try to overcome the contradictions. And diversity eventually turns into opposition, and the various ethnic groups are opposed because of the problem of genetic determinism, one might say. And yeah, and a way to solve the contradiction is to defend the ideals of, that's some sort of a Hegelian synthesis, to defend the Hegelian author, to defend the ideals of America, which historically, in a historical perspective, has been the product and the creation of WASP people, who are now considered to be negative, but their ideals transcend the question of race, and one way of solving the many problems that America are confronted with is to make sure that the ideals of the historical WASP population are preserved and kept alive. But because those who are willing to defend these values, let's cut the crap, they are mostly WASP. Because although these ideals are universal, which enable diversity in its positive and negative aspects, the negative aspects would be criminality, and they bring drugs, crime, etc., etc. So basically the tension and the problems of America is that those who are willing to fight for universal ID, they are mostly one group of people, not only, but if you had to quantify, it's mostly WASP people, mostly white people and WASPs, who are willing to defend the historical ID of America, namely freedom of speech, property rights. But it's a self-contradictory ID, namely because this is an ID which is supposed to benefit everyone. And a lot of people in the diversity side, they do not realize, for various reasons, lack of education or manipulation or whatever. I'm the one to blame for all the problems. I'm just trying to explain my own problems made manifest in the world. That's how I envision things. Namely, those people, they are willing to defend ID which actually benefit these people, but most of these people, they do not understand that they benefit from the ideas of these people. And these people, they would like to be allowed to enjoy the good aspects of their own ideas, basically. I simplify. This is my problem in a way. Yeah, I will stop the lecture now. I will take a break. Not a breakdown, just a break. I have explained the evolution of consciousness. I don't know when people will watch this video, but yeah. I know that I have to give my blood for my best ideas. So yeah. And now I will illustrate. I will conclude the video by showing. Yeah, I suffer from lots of problems, but at least I understand the problems. That's the first step towards. Yeah. Now I will show the way I envision the life, the intellectual and spiritual life, mostly in the US, but actually in every Western country. America is the most Hegelian country, the most divine country. That's a good news. The America, I think they expected this to be the most divine country. But yeah, it's not exactly what they thought it would be, maybe, but they are nonetheless spiritual and divine, but they're also conflicted. So yeah, here are the many oppositions. The positive and the negative are in a conceptual unity, but this is simply put, the various opposition that are encountered here in the realm of anthropology, here in the realm of phenomenology, Sittlichkeit, psychology, but eventually das Recht und Moralität brings about Sittlichkeit. So here are the various opposition, and here I talked in this video about the question of race from an epistemological and also political standpoint. But here is basically here's the question of IQ, all the conflicts and the contradictions that America, but most Western countries suffer from, and the opposites mutually and reciprocally determine one another. And if I had to be honest, the balance has switched too much to the left, and there has to be a restoration of order and virtue in order to bring about balance. Yeah. And now I will show the realm of Sittlichkeit. All these opposites, they reciprocally determine one another. And the inner conflicts are made manifest. The inner conflicts are made manifest outside, and this is why there are geopolitical tension. Yeah. So yeah. This is the life, the life of spirit in the U.S., in the Western world, and in the world at large. Yeah. Kalki will be all men against time come back. He will be the exponent of all that for which every one of them fought in vain against, the ever more powerful current of decay, the very current of history, the exponent of that eternal cosmic order, the earthly projection of which is the reign of righteousness mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. One point is, however, as a main feature of every recurring great end, beyond doubt, Kalki will act with unprecedented ruthlessness. His companions at arms will be the last Germans, the men of iron who will have victoriously stood the test of persecution and, what is more, the test of complete isolation in the midst of a dreary, indifferent world in which they have no place, who are facing that world and defying it through every gesture, every silence of theirs. Those I have called gods on earth. In every phase of the great cosmic struggle without beginning against the forces of disintegration, co-eternal with the forces of life. They are the bridge to supermanhood of which Nietzsche has spoken. Kalki will lead them through the flames of the great end, into the sunshine of the new golden age, and it will all begin again. The succession of ages in the same unchanging order, submitted to the same unchanging laws. The struggle against time, and finally the rush to the abyss, in spite of it, for the millionth and 10 millionth time, and a new great end, and a new radiant beginning, and a new time cycle, again and again. There is no definitive end. He will live throughout the ages in the faithful consciousness of the universe, the life rhythm of which he symbolizes, the long and more intense and finally almost desperate aspiration against time, which characterizes every recurring time cycle as soon as decay has set in obviously enough to be felt, will be every time a new expression of that self-same yearning after manifested perfection, for the sake of which he thought and lost. A new long-drawn cosmic outcry proclaiming that he was right in spite of all, and still every further golden age to come, every successive dawn and creation will be the living materialization of his highest dream. It shouldn't be taken literally every word, but I understood a few days ago that if I could have a dream, a pleasant dream, I would be surrounded by extraordinary blonde and blue-eyed Germans. Well, if it's not always fits perfectly the criteria, that's not a problem, but if I could have a dream, I would dream of having a spiritual family and friends like you. Hopefully we will be friends at some moment, in some spiritual realm maybe. And